Hey guys, so we're gonna go back to more light content than yesterday, but I had a weird idea. I wanted to talk about Persona 5 for a while now, but I couldn't think of anything original until I started thinking about Maruki. And I also had a Akechi video idea, so I figured we'll do both of those. So, obviously, spoilers for Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal Hole. Do not watch this video if you plan on playing those games or haven't beaten them yet. Because I am going over major plot points of both games. I will also be bringing up Persona 4 as well, but I'm really only spoiling the original Persona 4, not Golden. But at the same time, if you do not want to know who the true killer is, which is like the biggest plot reveal of the game, do not watch this video. I repeat, do not watch this video. Also, the game in the background is Persona 2 Innocent Sin. Obviously. But, yeah. War Persona 5, Persona 5 Royal, Persona 4. If you want to play any of those games, do not hot watch this video. Got it? Cool. So, something about Akechi I feel like goes untalked about is how important Akechi was to the Phantom Thieves. Phantom Thieves specifically. But mainly because of how he's a foil to them. Most people only talk about how he's a foil to Rin specifically, but they don't understand how Akechi is a foil to Phantom Thieves as a whole. So let's talk about that. So obviously, as you know, Akechi is the Black Mask, and as the Black Hack Mask, he murdered. We actually don't know how many people he murdered. So it could be any number, but we're just gonna say he's responsible for the deaths of Kasumi and directly murdered Wakaba, who's Futaba's mother, and Okumura. However, that's not the important bit, in my opinion. I want to talk about how Akechi technically caused all the events of the game, starting with Kamoshida. So, while An and Ryuji are arguably the least affected by Akechi's actions, it is still very evident that Akechi's actions were needed for the two arcs to happen. Mainly because it was around this point. I forgot what I was gonna say. While they don't Akechi doesn't bother with Kamoshida or anything, it's not about what he does specifically to An and Ryuji. It's almost like his lack of action because he I don't really have a good way of explaining this, do I? He was integral to their stories, he just didn't have that big of an effect until later on. Later on. So we're just gonna skip Kamoshida and jumped straight to Madarame. So, as you know, he was skulking around Madarame's palace, and by this point, nobody knew who he truly was. Nobody had even the slightest clue who the Black Mask was. This is important, hint, because it shows how differently the Phantom Thieves carry themselves at a palace compared to Akechi. And this is further commented on by Kaneshiro, who actually brought up the fact that Akechi was way different from the Phantom Thieves, and how he would go into palaces and pillage them. So, again, it's not like a huge narrative thing, but it does give insight on how his character works. When he's invading a palace, he kills without mercy, remorse, or thought. And that could be because Shido made him that way. That could be for any number of reasons. But we know for a fact that he has killed people in the metaverse, and he also takes from palaces without any form of care. Which would also explain why the guy is loaded. So, jumping to Futaba, obviously, he killed Futaba's mother, which jump-started her arc. And Futaba's mother being dead also set in motion Sojiro's arc. Now, you might be wondering how that makes him a foil to the Phantom Thieves. I'm getting there. This is all build up, because the reason why Akechi is a foil to the Phantom Thieves, at least character wise, isn't evident until Shido, but really Maruki. So we're just gonna go through what he did in earlier palaces. We already know he didn't go to Futaba's palace, mainly because he didn't know it existed. Because he barely even knew that Futaba existed until he joined the party for real. So, while yes, he wasn't important to Futaba accepting her persona, he did not do all that much to her directly. So, Okumura is where we first see his actions inside a palace. And you also see how skilled he is, because keep in mind, Rin canonically has third eye. And yet, Akechi managed to sneak by all the Phantom Thieves, including Rin. Which is that's impressive. If you can get by, there's Rin, On, Ryuji, Morgana, who also should have sensed him, by the way. Morgana should have also sensed him. Futaba, who really should have sensed him. Makoto, who is pretty perceptive. Yusuke, who admittedly isn't. That's 7 people. He somehow managed to sneak by 7 people, most of which are experts at perception and sensing people around them. He managed to sneak by 7 people and kill Okumura. That shows that he's not like the Phantom Thieves, because he's a quiet killer. Phantom Thieves, obviously they're experts in stealth, sure. But it's also clear that they are not taking the most intelligent routes through palaces. Because, keep in mind, we still have no clue how Akechi got up to the spaceport. Like, it's perfectly possible that he could have done it. Hit the same way the Phantom Thieves did. But I'm leaning towards he had a different entrance route. Because how? I'm pretty correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I'm pretty sure the spaceport had taken off by that point. So, but whatever. All this doesn't really have to do with his character yet, so I'm just gonna keep moving on. Then we get to Sai's Palace. And this is where his character starts to shine. Because Akechi in Sai's Palace is almost identical to Rin. It shows how well he placed the facade. Like, I am not explaining this well at all. Keep in mind, I've played Persona 5 Hive, and yes, I've played both versions actually. Because I didn't buy Royal at first. My first ever Persona game was the original Persona 5 for I think the PS4. And then I got Royal because of an uncle, and I got it for my PC. So, Akechi, he in Sai's Palace, conveniently sets up the Phantom Thieves, I'm doing air quotes, and he helps them through the palace to steal the treasure, but they don't end up doing it. Or at least that's what he thought. And yet, somehow no one, there's an asterisk to that, he thought no one would catch on to what he was doing, but it's whatever. It's mainly his effect on Rin that's up to note. Because every single other Phantom Thief, including Rin, I might add, distrust him, but Rin was, even if he's a silent protagonist, you can tell Rin still wanted to trust Akechi. It's kind of like how in Persona 4, and I guess by extension Golden, Narukami wanted to trust Adachi, but then quickly learned why he couldn't. And how Adachi kind of was the antithesis of everything the investigation team stood for. Same thing with Akechi, though people like to undercut him because of poor writing. Which, believe me, we'll touch on. So, a lot of reasons why people say Akechi, his writing was poor, is because it was obvious that he was the Black Mask. And yes, it is obvious that he was Black Mask. I'm not going to hold you. It was. It's not. But then again, if you were paying attention in Persona 4, in either version of Persona 4, it was pretty obvious that Adachi was the killer. Like, let's be so for real. I mean, maybe not as much in the original Persona 4, but definitely in Golden. The cracks were there. And keep in mind, that's fine. You can have an obvious killer. But what makes Akechi, in my opinion, just as good as Adachi, is the fact that the Phantom Thieves did need him at first. Like, they wouldn't have gotten through Sai's Palace without him. Which builds up maybe not an extra layer of trust, but an extra layer of meaning in the Phantom Thieves. Because they care about him more. It's not like Yusuke where he had moments in the palace he was introduced, but the Phantom Thieves could have gotten through it without him. Which Akechi was very much needed for the palace he was in. Just like he was needed for Maruki. But we're not at Maruki yet, so we're just gonna go to Shido. Yada yada yada. By this point in the story, we all know he's the Black Mask. He revealed it and everything. Cool. I feel like people say Shido is comically evil, which to a degree he is, but he's also pretty realistic. It's obvious that he doesn't really view his constituents as human, or at least on the same level as him. It's evident from the way he treats Rin and Ryuji, and basically all the Phantom Thieves. So, it wouldn't really be a stretch that Akechi didn't treat them as if they were on the same level either. Because it is a learned behavior. And also, Akechi being feral in his Black Mask form, honestly, I can relate. Not to the whole being a serial killer part. Let's make that clear. I am not relating to the serial killer part. I am relating because a lot of times when people go through traumatic events in life, like Akechi did, sometimes you have to learn how to make yourself seem bigger and tougher and more powerful in order to survive. And that's kind of what he was doing. So, in character, it makes sense for Black Mask to be a personification of strength. Even if it's a vastly overblown and, quite frankly, stupid one. But technically, yes, for a game that talks a lot about psychology, it did get that one fact correct. It's also showing how Akechi unknowingly does the same things as his abusers. Because his motivation was stupid. Let's be really clear about that. Akechi's motivation was butt cheeks. And I'm going to tell you why, too. Akechi could have killed Shido multiple times over. So, we already know... You know how in Persona 3, it's... I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, so skip a few seconds. Skip like a minute or two if you think it is. But, you know how certain people in Persona 3 have artificial personas? I think it's something like that. So, Akechi, we already know, got his persona naturally. He was a natural born persona user. I almost called him a loser, which he kind of is. But the thing is... How do I say this? Akechi could have killed Shido because he already knew what the metaverse was. Like, yes, Shido trained him and was responsible for training him in how to use the metaverse. But there's no reason Akechi could have couldn't have gone back and killed Shido. Like, even if he couldn't do the entire palace alone, we've seen him inflict mental shutdowns in other ways. Like, there's no way Akechi was going through everybody's palaces in such a short time frame. That chance. Because let's say all the deadlines in Persona 5, which take about a month, are about the length it would take to go through an entire palace. Okay? And let's say, so it takes about 28 days to go through each palace. We already know that had the mental shutdowns have been occurring for only for like the past year at most, or maybe a few years, because Futaba's mother died when Futaba was really young. So possibly longer than a few years. I don't know the exact timeline of Persona 5, so you're just gonna have to go with me on this. But if every palace takes about a month to go through, I'm telling you, Akechi could have just trained long enough to kill Shido in that time. And I guarantee you, Shido did not start out with a huge palace like he did. We already know palaces grow. They're kind of like plants. The more distorted you get, the bigger your palace becomes. Which is why Kamoshida's palace was pretty small. Because his palace was relatively new. Same for Madarame. Same for Kaneshiro. Their palaces were smaller because they were newer. Because Kaneshiro got newfound wealth. Madarame got hot fame when his artwork exploded. Kamoshida just got the gold medal, so his palace grew. Futaba, and if you notice, Futaba's palace is one of the biggest palaces, because guess what? Her trauma had been festering over years. Okumura's was pretty big because Big Bang Burger had been big. Sai's palace, not as big as the previous two, but still pretty big because her workaholicism had also been left to fester. So, assuming... Now, keep in mind, I can absolutely be wrong. But Shido could have just started as a normal Mementos target, you know? Like, Akechi... Like, I hate to believe that all of these characters had palaces. There's just no way. They all were in Mementos. Which also brings up another problem of how Akechi would have gotten through Mementos. I mean, I guess Akechi was pretty well known as a detective prince, so maybe he could have gotten through. But then again, these don't seem like the type of people to be too deep in Mementos. I'm just saying, I have a feeling Shido would have been in Mementos. And even then, even if he wasn't, since we know palaces grow over time, Shido could have been dealt with while his palace was smaller. And even if it wasn't, Akechi could have just trained and taken it out himself. Because he already got most of the way through Shido's palace on his own. He only died in the cellar because he was ambushed. Even if there was a cognitive Akechi on the prowl, that wouldn't have been enough. Because Akechi would have been working alone. He could have killed cognitive Akechi long before he had the chance to kill him. And then he could have killed Shido. Simple, right? So, and even if by some miracle he couldn't kill Shido, why didn't he just kill Shido in the real world? Like, I get it, Shido has bodyguards. But, come on, assassinations happen every day. And we know Akechi knows how to cover up a crime. We've seen him do it. So, him not being able to cover up a crime, to me, is very illogical. But whatever. That's his motivations being dumb. But he wanted revenge. That was the main thing. He wanted revenge. Which is not unlike the Phantom Thieves. Keep in mind, On and Ryuji join because they want revenge on Kamoshida. Yusuke, revenge on Madarame, even if he doesn't hate him. Makoto, Kanashiro, though, was less of revenge and more of wanting to get out of debt. But again, that could fall under the umbrella of revenge. Futaba awakens to her persona because she wanted revenge on the people who killed her mother. Okumura, same deal. Haru, who didn't want to get sold off. The only real exception to this is Sai. But then again, that also feeds into Akechi wanting revenge on Shido, because that's where he betrays the Phantom Thieves. And then Shido is obviously for Rin and Akechi. But really everyone, because everybody has a reason to hate Shido. With maybe the exception of Ryuji and On. If you notice a pattern here, it's that Ryuji and On don't really have a reason to hate most of these villains. Like, besides the fact that their friends have a bone to pick, they don't really have a reason to hate these villains. Which is fine. It's fine, but it does make their characters slightly weaker. But then again, Ryuji is still one of my favorites, and On is the first girl I romanced in a Persona game. Anyways. We get to Maruki. And that's where things get interesting. Because I was thinking about this the other day. How does Rin react to the ideal world? If you notice through all his conversation options, besides like the ones that cause endings, he is very wishy-washy about how he feels about the cognitive world. Same with all the Phantom Thieves except for one. And you remember who that one is. It's Akechi. And he's like, he's instantly like, I hate it, I want to get out. Whereas everyone else fights back at first. And you might be... And that's why he's a good foil. It's purely from that interaction. Akechi of the Justice Arcana does not want to be owned or trapped by anything or anyone. Now that's a good character motivation and a natural progression of his character, or should I say unnatural progression after what he went through, who at the hands of Shido. So he he does this, and every time Rin questions him and is like, "Are you sure we should do this?" he says, "Bro, shut the F up and destroy this world." And he's like that from the beginning to the end, whereas every other Phantom Thief questions how they feel about the reality because, oh, I'm finally happy. I finally get everything I want. And that's the reason why, the crux of my argument of why Akechi is not badly written, is poorly written but needed to be. Even Rin is, because the Phantom Thieves, their view on justice is always changing depending on what the plot throws at them. At first, it was against people that did harm to people near them. That's who they wanted to exact their justice on. Then it was helping the general public and conforming to the whims of the public. Then they went back to going after evil people based on who needed the most correction. And then with Maruki's world, they were more divided than ever. Because not only were they happy, everyone in the world was happy. Until you realize how hypocritical Maruki's world is. Because, think about it. In a world where nothing bad happens, nothing good can happen either. Like, Maruki's ideal world is fundamentally flawed, which is best evident by what happens if you take the deal. And specifically, what happens to Akechi. If Ren chooses to take the deal, and yes, I'm not calling him Joker, I'm calling him Ren because I believe that's his canon name. Obviously, he has other ones in other media, but I'm calling Joker Ren. If Ren chooses to accept the ideal world, what happens to Akechi is that he essentially gets lobotomized. Because the real Akechi, or I guess in this case he's a cognition of Akechi, the real Akechi would never want this. And by choosing Maruki's world, you're choosing the illusion of happiness and happiness over what your friends actually want. That's what's happening. It's kind of like how in Persona 4 you can choose Adachi over your friends. Or, I guess another spoiler, skip ahead if you don't want to hear this. Skip ahead 2 minutes. It's how you can choose to fight Nyx before. You can either choose to fight Nyx or not fight Nyx. It's based on whether or not Nyx, whether or not you kill or not kill Ryoji. It's based on that. So, hypothetically, yes. That it all loops back into how you're portraying the scenes of the game and how Akechi, in all his flawed nature, best represents the theme of the games. Hames, in his flaws, he chose conformity, whereas the Phantom Thieves chose to rebel against society. He chose to feign conformity and work on things from the inside instead of attacking from the outside, and ended up being swept up. That's what makes Akechi and Rin different, and by extension, all of the Phantom Thieves. Makoto ignores the problems of her peers or willfully turns a blind eye in order to conform to authority until she doesn't. It's very important that she did that because she thought that changing things from the inside and changing things by following the book would work. Same with Haru. Didn't fight back at first until she was forced to. Same with Futaba, who mindlessly went with the idea that she got her mother killed until realizing that she was lied to. And same with Ryuji and An, who thought that the only way to deal with their situation was to accept it and move on and run away from it. Akechi is the prime example of why that mentality does not work, and why Rin's tactics of attacking it from the outside and rebelling against the system to change it works. Because Akechi never changed that. That aspect of his character never changed until his death. He shows how dangerous that mentality is, which is why you can draw connections between that mentality and all of the Phantom Thieves. Same reason why you can draw connections between Akechi and Maruki. Maruki never had relations with Akechi, if you notice. At least as far as I know. I've played the whole game, or I've watched the whole game, but I haven't seen any. I've watched the whole game, played most of it, and I didn't see anything between Akechi and Maruki. It was mainly about how Rin told Maruki about him. And that's how Akechi was brought into Maruki's ideal world. With his still fundamental flaw being fixed. Because Ren's vision of Akechi and Maruki's are fundamentally different. And when you choose the bad ending and choose to accept the reality, that's why he has to lobotomize. That's why Akechi gets lobotomized. And mindlessly gets along with the Phantom Thieves and Rin. Without any form of protest or resentment or judgment. Because Rin chose his ideal version of Akechi, one that loved him and never questioned him, over the actual thing. If any of that makes sense. And then also just random things about Maruki's world while I'm at it. Number one, why didn't he bring back Ryuji's father or Kasumi? Like, I get that Sumire still thought that she was Kasumi, but still, he'll. It makes no sense because if even if she still thought she was Kasumi, he could have brought back Sumire or Ryuji's dad was still instrumental in Ryuji's plotline. Which, another thing, why didn't we ever see Ryuji's mom? Like, she just goes unshown for the entire game. Or, honestly, Shiho. We should have seen Shiho again. Nothing important for Morgana, obviously. But Makoto's father. I don't think we see Makoto's father either. At least I'm pretty sure. We see Sumire's dad, which is another telltale sign that this world is fucked up, because Sumire's dad does not act like that from the way she described him. He's not all kind like that. Um yeah, that's another thing. And also Maruki's world is also flawed because how does he handle people not getting what they want? Like, the whole point of the ideal world is that you get what you want in life, or you find a new thing to uncover whenever you're upset. His whole thing is that you're running away from your problems. But my question is, how does he fix all of that? Like, he doesn't know everybody. But I guess that's a question only Atlas can answer. But yeah, back to Akechi. So Akechi's not poorly written. He obviously has parallels between himself and the Phantom Thieves, which is also why he's not one. Like, he never claims to be a Phantom Thief again. And after Sai's Palace, and that's why. Even in his death scene with Shido, he was still not a Phantom Thief. So, it's also, you can also see why Maruki's world is pretty hypocritical because of how he treated Shido, but again, more ahead of myself I'm getting. Akechi was needed, and also something I wish Royal did, but surprisingly, I know y'all are gonna flame me for this. The anime does. What the anime does better is how Ren reacts to Akechi's death. Now, that's not to say it's not touched on in Royal, because if you look at Ren's dialogue options when Maruki drops the bomb that, oh my god, Akechi will die if you don't accept my world, Ren, no matter what option you choose, will always be freaked out by that fact. It doesn't matter which one you choose, he will always be freaked out. It's just varying levels of freaked out. Like, it's always, we have to make the right decision. Think about it, or this isn't small potatoes. because Akechi is Rin's best friend. And the anime actually shows this. I think it was in an OVA where Rin literally he breaks down crying over Akechi's death. Like the whole OVA is about him coming to terms with the fact that Akechi is gone and that he's never seeing him again. It it's insane. So out of all the Phantom Thieves, Akechi is important for. Rin is the most important. But most of these character arcs would never started without Akechi, except for like on and Ryuji, on Ryuji and Yusuke. Makoto's arc would have never started if it wasn't for Sai's High getting a palace, his and Sai's workaholicism, which was caused by Akechi because she was studying the mental shutdown cases. Futaba would have either A never come out of her shell after her mother died, or B actually lived a happy life. Like actually I think Futaba's the one character that would have been better off if Akechi didn't do anything to her. Still bad, but eh. Haru's entire arc only happened because Okumura had died. I'd let's see. What else? Sai I would have still been convicting the wrong people. Oh, if it wasn't for Akechi. Sojiro would have never gotten Sojiro's arc would have never happened if Wakaba never got killed. And not only that, Sojiro would still be the worst. Rin is obvious as let's see. Kasumi slash Sumire wouldn't have happened because Kasumi wouldn't be dead. So Sumire would have never had to get an identity of her own. She would always be living vicariously through her sister. And Morgana, I mean, I guess he'd still exist, but the Phantom Thieves would have never been formed because guess what? Rin would still be he in his town because I mean, I guess he wouldn't, but Rin would have been somewhere different entirely because the whole thing with Shido would have taken a drastically different turn if he didn't get taken in by Sojiro. So yeah, that's why Akechi's important to the plot. Like, hate on him all you want, and believe me, I will, because honestly, out of all the antagonists, he's still my least favorite. But he was needed for the plot. And his writing, while not great, does make sense for the character they were going for. Also, I am aware this video sounded stupid as fuck. Huck, I am tired, just getting over being sick. So, I'm not. And I kind of forgot everything as I was recording this. Okay, see ya.